Tengo a ese capullo justo detrás. No quiero ni verlo caminar. Frau Kraut sigue adelante y la se convertirá en una pecera.
Mierda, lo has dejado escapar. Necesito un momento para pensar. Claro, no hay problema. Encuentra un Big Daddy y registra su cuerpo. Te sugeriría que buscaras uno muerto. ¿Ves el sistema de control del traje? Muy bien. Cógelo. Ese es el primer paso para convertirte en uno de esos asquerosos Big Daddy. La única forma de cruzar esa puerta por la que se ha metido Fontaine es hacer que te la abra una pequeña. Y únicamente confiarán en ti si tienes el aspecto de uno de esos enormes brutos apestosos. E incluso suenas y hueles igual que ellos.
quería algo de compañía. En pie y lo repetiremos.
¿A dónde crees que vas? Tienes que convertirte en un Big Daddy antes de poder atraer a las pequeñas.
¡No huyas! ¿Qué te pasa, Mary? Parece que necesitas un buen amigo.
Que hoy el parásito. Líbreme. Por favor. Llévame a su lugar. Tienes ojos.
Cuánto me alegro de no estar cerca de ti y de ese espantoso olor. No alcanzo a comprender por qué a las pequeñas les atrae el olor de esas feromonas.
¿Me vas a denunciar a la policía?
¿Se llevó a mi pequeña? Escóndete en la oscuridad. ¡Te va mucho! Pero es mi pequeña. Tienes ojos, ¿no lo ves? John, no quiero subir a la mesa.
Violas mi criterio. Esta imagen me arreglará. Todo saldrá bien, ya verás.
Sé por qué no pueden ser adultos, pero ¿por qué solamente niñas? No consigo determinar por qué, pero sé que es así. Fontaine dice, un servicio menos que construir en el orfanato. Es asombroso ver el efecto del Adán en sus cuerpecitos. Sus propias células sustituidas por las nuevas células madre en el mismo instante en que sufren el daño. Estas niñas son prácticamente invulnerables. Es una pena que no tenga el mismo efecto en un adulto. Un hombre al que no se pudiera matar se cotizaría mucho en el mercado.
¡Sacia tus ansias del Circus of Valius!
Intento ayudar, pero a veces cometo errores. Intento ayudar, pero a veces cometo errores. Voy a...
To kill, excuse me, to harvest or not to harvest. The moral dilemma that follows you throughout the BioShock experience and defines the fate of the player. This choice lays at the center of your BioShock story and has repercussions that can be felt in nearly every facet of the gameplay. Part of BioShock's lasting legacy, of course, are the little sisters and this moral choice that presented itself to the player. Everyone became a water cooler conversation about like, well, did you save them? Did you harvest them? That concept, Ken, was that something that came about early in development, or that binary choice? When did that come into the game?
I don't remember when. I mean, we had the concept of them being protected, but I can't remember when you actually
certainly
chose.
wasn't. When there were slugs, it was not meaningful. I think there was.
Do you salt it? Do you not salt it?
Yeah. There were resources that you could get, but there was no choice there, right? The choice was, do I want to fight the Big Daddy or not?
Yeah.
I think once we got into the realm of they have to be empathetic, the player has to have some feeling towards them, which you're not going to get from slugs. Right. Then we start seeing that opportunity there of like, okay, nobody's going to want to do harm to these girls, or do they? Like, and do we allow them to? It was we weren't comfortable with it at first when it first came out that we could.
I think it was important that it was a way to reflect the sort of larger economic questions of a world like Rapture, where where the economy drives everything. Are there any limits to economic decision making versus moral decision making? Because that's sort of what the Randian notion is that it's not the role that you don't sort of legislate morality. Let's try to take that to an extreme and see where that ends up. And Little Sisters sort of became that. And in this world, they became a commodity. And the question we have for the players, are you willing, they're a commodity to you as well, potentially. Are you willing to participate in the commodification? There was, I think, a fair amount of nervousness internally at the publisher about it for a little while, but pretty quickly they were able to sort of say, look, we trust you guys, and go, do this. And I only had the press, and this sort of happens over and over again. The games press worried a ton about it and would wring their hands about it. They ever recognized it was a setting topic, but that it was done to a larger purpose, that it wasn't just sort of like, hey, this is the game where you kill children. And
whatever, and that was a sensitivity. I know that you guys wanted to call them little sisters, not little girls, and it was and it wasn't, it wasn't killing them, it was harvesting them. And I mean, you did some things probably on purpose, right, to sort of explain that this, you weren't doing anything vicious to them, right?
Well, I mean, they do sort of disappear out of you, and a big slug out of their belly, comes up. That we didn't want that to be graphic. We wanted to be very clear that you were killing them. Yeah. But it was not intended to be a prurient in terms of, hey, this is a simulation of pulling a sea slug out of a little girl's belly. But we wanted you to understand that you were making a very diabolical moral economic pact there. And we think that came across, and I think it came across well enough. And I think the test of how well it came across is, I think most people didn't really thought of it as am I willing to do this thing or not? Right. And people would tell us stories how their girlfriend saw them harvesting, and then they literally slept on the couch that night. Right. And that's an interesting, that was interesting how people connected to a 3D mesh that's really no different than any other 3D mesh in the world. This little sister, she's not a person. She's a 3D asset, a virtual 3D asset, right? That has a voice actor connected to it who's an adult woman, and nobody was actually getting harmed, but people still emotionally connected to them and made an emotional connection.
And also, I think when you're playing, you don't really know what the impact of that choice is. Yes. And that's sort of the curiosity of you're a gamer, so it's am I going to game the system? Which one should I pick? How does this impact things as you go through the game? It's never really fully clear what that choice is going to lead to, right? And the ambiguousness of that was something you wanted to sort of create mystery around throughout the game?
Yeah, we went back and forth a lot about what the rewards for harvesting versus saving would be, and actually I think we should have really pushed further that the rewards for saving were should have been much more meager than the rewards for harvesting, just to really sort of put you up against the wall, push you up against the wall, and say, you know, are you going to stick by your moral guns here because you're going to pay for it? Because that's usually the way life is, right? It's always harder to take a moral path than it is to take an amoral path. But there's incentives to take amoral paths because it's the easier path.
As you play through the game, eventually you get to the ending, and as we know now, there were sort of two endings that you know, were affected by that choice. And that was something at the time, I know you said publicly that you weren't in favor of sort of having two endings. Was that in part because, you know, the game is about not having choice, or did you think that, you know, the two endings were, I don't know, like, I'm interested for narratively, like, why you didn't want to go that path?
It seemed forced, given that the game really sort of almost made a joke, I mean, a meta commentary joke about the lack of agency in games, the lack of meaning of those choices, given that you have these two endings. I guess you could make an argument that, well, you were free, you were given choice of the, you know, once Ryan's dead, and that's really what it's about. But I think we also didn't really have enough time to execute on those super well. I was pretty happy with how the happier one came out, you know, with the sort of little sister focus, but it's a much more subtle story than I would have time to tell about you, sort of your slow descent into, you know, moral chaos and dissolute living and all the things that sort of come along with a life that is sort of separate from a moral structure. It's a long story.
And so, I mean, you were just switching a cutscene. It wasn't like you were doing sort of a whole other level that was different or something. So the choice was...
There's two cutscenes with very tight time and economic
or just start a nuclear war.
Yes. And that's not, you know,
you're a nice guy, or you start a nuclear war.
And because we had so many problems on our plate, that was something I had to sort of do in the spare time. So I was pretty happy with one, but not very happy with the other.
I know you had said publicly before that there was another sort of more ambiguous ending that you had originally planned, or what would you have done?
There was a notion of an ambiguous ending, in which if I just wrote one, I would have found a way that would just talk about the moral ambiguity of the world rather than the sort of, you know, positive or negative, because it is such a, look, I think we really tried with BioShock not to sort of make a game about good and evil. It was really about circumstances and what circumstances lead people to, and how they delude themselves with ideology to do things that they would think are evil, but it's okay because it's for the good cause. And that's what I probably would have. If I just had one to write, I'd probably focus more on that, you know, how difficult it is to sort of align when you start being driven by ideology rather than being in the moment and thinking about the impact of what you're doing.
Sean, you talked to gamers, I'm sure, over the years. Did you ever get a sense of how many people harvested versus saved, and was there any sort of data? I mean, this is before the days where you get telemetry and data on like what people picked and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, it seems like more people saving Little Sisters, although I have a few friends that are, you know, I just harvested every single one. I wanted to see what happened. So I mean, I don't know if that was more, you know, the game developer and them trying to see, you know, what would happen, but certainly for the most part, I think most people, which I guess is a good thing. It means that maybe people are good at heart. You know, they kind of feel bad. They want to save the Little Sisters. So yeah, I'll say it. You know, the needle sways towards the green there.
Time for bed, Mr. B. Hurry, Mr. Bubbles. ¿Por qué te llevas a mi pequeña?
Maldita sea. Tenían que enviar las botas de los Big Daddies aquí, no a la maldita biblioteca. ¿A qué clase de idiotas está contratando Ryan últimamente? Estas chapuzas de mierda no pasaban con Fontaine.
No debería tener que pagar.
Andrew, Ryan, no recuerda. Todos hacemos elecciones, pero al final nuestras elecciones nos hacen a nosotros. Pero es muy pequeña. Cobarde.
Tienen un olor terrible, muy fuerte. Quizás se pueda hacer algo, aunque a las Little Sisters parece gustarles. Ahora tenemos que encontrar reclutas. Convertirse en Big Daddy no tiene vuelta atrás. Pero Ryan dice, no te preocupes, los reclutas no serán problema. Ese es Ryan. Es un buen tipo.
Estoy lista para irme a la cama, señor Payne.
¿Cuál es la mayor mentira jamás creada? ¿Cuál es la obscenidad más atroz jamás partida? Pero los
Una lástima que las cosas salieran así, chico. Tú y yo podríamos haber sido los amos de este lugar. Ahora no te queda más que una larga y fría nada. Las damas se pelearán por mí. No pretende. ¡Vuelves! No lo decía en serio. Sí que te ha comido el tarro la patata. Puedes criticar a Ryan cuanto quieras, pero el viejo acertó de pleno en algo muy sencillo. No darás ni un paso hasta que alguien te diga adelante.
Recordatorio de Raptor. Todos tenemos facturas que pagar. El toque de queda para conseguir pero el toque de queda no lo es. Quedaos en vuestro lugar. No hay más.
Bienvenido al bandido de la munición. Muchas gracias, señor.
Yo que tú daría media vuelta, chico. Aquí no conseguirás más que disgustos. ¿Qué? Estás infectado.
Eso está bien. Todavía conseguiremos convertirte en un asqueroso Frankenstein. Allí hay un casco y un par de botas. Y podremos, ¿cómo se dice? Ponernos en marcha.
La guerra es algo terrible. Los japoneses mataron a todos los hombres de mi ciudad, salvo a Suchon. Suchon tenía opio. Opio, muy bueno. Esta guerra también es terrible, pero no para Suchon. Ahora todos están asustados, todos necesitan a Adam, más del que pueden hacer las Little Sisters. Lo bueno es que la guerra produce muchos cadáveres. Suchon conoce un modo de reciclar a Adam de un cadáver. Pero no puedo enviar a una Little Sister por la calle sin protección. Suchon debe pensar en ello.
¿Podría haber cometido errores? Uno no construye ciudades y se deja llevar por la duda. ¿Pero puede uno gobernar con absoluta certeza? Sé que mis creencias me han elevado, como sé que las cosas que he rechazado me habrían destruido. Pero la ciudad se desmorona ante mí. ¿Tan convencido estoy de mis propias creencias que he dejado de ver la verdad? Quizá. Pero Atlas anda por ahí y pretende destruirme y destruir mi ciudad. Cuestionarse supone rendirse. No me cuestionaré.
Gracias por ayudarme. Estoy lista para irme a la cama, señor Pompas.
Tan solo quiero...
Bienvenido al bandido de la munición. Muchas gracias, señor.
Eso es lo que decía el libre. ¿Visto bien?
¿Quién es ese? Solo estás consiguiendo...
¡Está acabado! ¡Todo acabado! ¡No huyas de ¡Deja de perder el tiempo y pelea! ¡Vuelve, vuelve aquí! ¡Ay!
No te preocupes. No pretendí... Ninguno de estos pringados me dirige la palabra. Me toman por un monstruo. ¡Al diablo con ellos!
Bien, seguimos. Señor, tenemos ángeles que besar.
Es un mundo maravilloso, ¿verdad? ¿Cómo puedo agradecerte tanta amabilidad? Te envío a otra pequeña con una muestra de nuestro aprecio.
¿Sabes? Deberías agradecérmelo. Yo te traje aquí.
Gracias.
Te mostré quién eres.
Muchísimas gracias.
No te habían contado más que mentiras hasta que yo llegué.
Maldita sea. Tenían que enviar las botas de los Big Daddies aquí, no a la maldita biblioteca. ¿A qué clase de idiotas está contratando Ryan últimamente? Estas chapuzas de mierda no pasaban con Fontaine.
We tricked you, monster.
Sí, esto sí que es un Big Daddy. ¿Estás listo? Ahora ve al conducto de Little Sisters junto al terreno de pruebas.
Ahora yo tengo el Adam. ¿Crees que ese traje de hojalata es siquiera la mitad de lo que hace falta para meterme miedo? Tan reales como cualquier cosa que hayas leído en el periódico. Pobre cabrón. Un monstruo sin madre. Fruto de un experimento científico mal concebido.
Tienes que hacerla salir de su escondite y entonces te dejarán cruzar la puerta. Vamos, golpea el conducto con la llave inglesa. Y por favor, significaría mucho para mí que trataras bien a las niñas. Mis pequeñas niñas. Las pequeñas te llevarán hasta el monte, pero debes protegerlas.
Hola, señor Blake. Tenemos ángeles de
Ni siquiera recuerdas la mayoría. Te metí en un submarino cuando apenas eras un renacuajo.
No seas tortuga, señor P. Los ángeles no esperan a las tortugas. Hola, señor P. Tenemos ángeles de
Rápido, señor P. ¿Puedo ver a los ángeles?
señor.
¡Ay, mi pequeño
¿Ángeles no
padre!
esperan a las tortugas?
Quizá algún día me busque una familia de verdad. Funciona muy bien con los pringados.
¡Al hala, señor P! ¿Tenemos ángeles que besar? ¡Al hala, señor P! ¿Tenemos ángeles que besar?
¿Hora de irse, señor P?
¡Mira, señor Pompasada!
Mira, aunque ya no tiene la necesidad física de recolectar, el condicionamiento mental de su chon todavía las mantiene realizando su terrible labor. Jamás podremos espiar pecados.
Rápido, señor P. Puedo ver a los ángeles.
¡Hala, señor P! ¿Tenemos ángeles que besar? Me gusta conseguir.
¿Hora de irse, señor P?
¿A dónde vas, cariño? Da la cara y... Era un bonito ángel. Me gustan mis Veo a Adam, señor P.
Rápido, señor P. Puedo ver a los ángeles bailando.
Tortugas, señor. Ángeles no esperan a las tortugas. ¡Al hala, señor P! ¡Hala, señor P! Tenemos
Pero
ángeles que
el
besar.
toque de queda no lo es. Quedaos en vuestro lugar. Evitaos problemas.
Vamos, vamos, señor P. No hay tiempo que perder.
¡Hala, señor P! Tienes que proteger a las pequeñas. El Adam ya no recorre sus cuerpos y son tan vulnerables como cualquier otro niño. Solo las pequeñas pueden abrir estas puertas. Debes protegerlas. Si cae una pequeña, puedes llamar a otra en un conducto. Pero perder siquiera una es un pecado.
Rápido, señor P. Puedo ver a los ángeles bailando en el cielo. Vamos, vamos, señor P. No hay tiempo que perder. Vamos, señor P. Estoy lista para irme a la casa.
Señor P, ¿le das? ¡Hala, señor P! Tortuga, señor. Ángeles esperan a
¿Qué estaría pensando? No me había chutado ningún plástico en todo el tiempo que llevaba en este acuario. Pensé que no convenía mezclar negocios con placer, pero ¡vaya! Olvida todos los polvos para la nariz y demás tonterías con las que he estado perdiendo el tiempo. ¡Esto es la releche!
Estoy lista para irme a la cama, señor P.
¡Hala, señor P! ¿Tenemos ángeles que besar?
¿Hora de irse, señor P? Estoy lista para irme a la cama, señor P. Vamos, vamos, señor P. No hay tiempo que perder.
¡Hala,
conducto y llama a otra pequeña. Contigo que solas. Solas en la amenazadora oscuridad.
¡Hola, señor P! ¿Tenemos ángeles que besar?
Rápido, señor P. Puedo ver a los ángeles bailando en el cielo.
Rápido. La cosecha atraerá la atención de los splitters.
Me gusta conseguir a Ramiro.
Rápido, señor P. Puedo ver a los ángeles bailando en el cielo. Vamos, vamos, señor P. No hay tiempo que perder.
¡Hala, señor P! ¿Tenemos ángeles que besar?
Rápido, señor P. Puedo ver a los ángeles bailando en el cielo. ¿Hora de irse, señor P?
¡Hala, señor P! ¿Tenemos ángeles que besar?
Vamos, vamos, señor P. No hay tiempo que perder.
Puede que esto baste para la chusma trabajadora y los chupapintas. Pero yo necesito más, más. Quiero recombinarme hasta que no me quede nada más que meterme.
Andrew, Ryan.
Fontaine está cerca. Ya te estás acercando.
Pero al final, nuestras elecciones nos hacen.
Rápido, señor P. Puedo ver a los ángeles bailando.
Bienvenido al partido de la munición. Sin dinero no hay munición. Señor.
Bueno, tienes que usar la aguja de la Little Sister para extraer el Adam de Fontaine. Es el único modo de vencerlo.
Toma, coge. Clávaselo al
Fontaine
hombre
aguarda
malo.
arriba. A partir de aquí no hay vuelta atrás. Asegúrate de estar listo para enfrentarte a él antes de continuar.
The illusion of choice is a thinly veiled dynamic that drives many single-player gaming experiences. And while many developers spend a lot of time trying to convince players that choice is real and authentic in their games, the truth more often is that choice is a superficial concept in gaming narrative. BioShock confronted this idea head-on, searing into our minds a innocuous three-word phrase with an unforgettable new meaning. Would you kindly?
Of course, one of the most memorable moments in the game is the "would you kindly" phrase and the reveal of how that's been motivating the player throughout the entire game. It's still, to me, one of the most classic kind of narrative moments in games in the past decade. What's interesting about that phrase is that it didn't always start like that. Can you tell us sort of about the evolution of sort of the the conditioning of the player? And there was once Excelsior was the phrase once.
Yeah, this is. I'm trying to recall some of this. So we had the idea, because we had the Andrew Ryan scene very early, and we knew sort of all the events that would happen. There were phrases before there was "would you kindly." The notion existed and what it meant and what it was, but we didn't actually have the phrase "would you kindly" until later. So we had a bunch of terms we threw in there. And like Excelsior was it for one point. That's probably comes from my Stan Lee fanboyism.
Was that like so throughout the game? It would have been like Excelsior.
Just randomly say
There
that.
are some things when you're making games you just sort of throw in as like, we need
Sounds
something.
cool in
We
a
need
Why don't
something
you head
here.
over there, Excelsior?
And then it sits there
Yeah.
for a year.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you kind of forget it's not good, right? And then until somebody comes along and says, dude.
Seriously?
Yeah.
What,
Or you meant
Excelsior?
it to be like a stub in. You never
Right.
meant it to actually gain traction, and then you're like, oh crap.
But that sense of some phrase or word being repeated throughout the game that you wouldn't really realize its meaning
Yes.
Until later, that was there very early on.
Yes, yeah. And the fact that you would have something that seemed like a non-thing and then came back at you like a freight train later on was there from pretty early.
Sit, would you kindly? Stand, would you kindly? Run. Stop. Turn. A man chooses. A slave obeys.
So that phrase evolved, but talk about that, the sort of meta-narrative of, being in a game, thinking that you have a sense of choice and making these decisions, but then obviously realizing that the player ultimately didn't have choice or was conditioned in a way that they would react to that. That was, sort of a new idea for a game. Where did that come from on your side, Ken? I mean, was there sort of a deeper sort of, meaning behind it?
No, look, I think I was always interested in the concept, whether it's, Oedipus, not to get too pointy-headed here, but Oedipus sort of thinking he has, I'm going to leave, this city and go to another city because there's been this prophecy about me, and I'm going to avoid my fate, and I'm in complete control, and then finding out he's not in control at all, to the Manchurian Candidate, which is a story I love about, somebody who you find out is just a puppet, living a life of a man, and Fight Club. I always love those kind of stories about who am I and what is my agency in this world, because look, we struggle. I think everybody struggles that. How much we really have control over, and how much is our boss or parents or whatever telling us what to do. So that seemed like a natural thing for a story, and because it came from movies, that idea a lot, and plays. I don't think it was very. There was a lot of. It hadn't been explored in games really, and games are particularly interesting because games.
Because you feel like you are interacting with choice,
and you're really being, most games, especially at the time, you're really just being railroaded down a corridor. It's very easy to underestimate gamers, and I think probably I did a little of my own underestimation there, that it would be a little too pointy-headed for people, but people seem to really engage, because it spoke to an experience they had, a struggle as a gamer they've always had, which is like, I want to control, but how much control do I really have in this game?
True. And Sean, it was also something that, was a great surprise when you played through the game. And I'm sure even for people on the team, did everyone know that when Ken was sort of doing it, or did it was revealed as people played through it?
I think, at some point the entire team knew. It wasn't, it was something that was talked about with a smaller group before, it was brought to the entire team. Early on, when you heard the idea, and you just kind of clicks, right? You're like, okay, I totally get this.
Did people get it? I seem to remember people looking at me like I was like a lunatic.
Maybe not the specifics, and maybe it's the Excelsior, or maybe you're talking about the Excelsior time, but the idea that you don't really have choice, and exactly like you said, you played through how many video games, and everybody's game is going to end the same way. You're going to kill these people, you're going to pass through these checkpoints, and you think you have a choice, but ultimately the only real choice is stop playing the game. So the idea that we're kind of like taking that on resonated. Now the actual, is it Excelsior, or is it the Latin phrase I forgot, or if it's would you kindly?
See, here's how I remember it, and I could be, I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I can remember being so surprised by the outside reaction, because I remember the internal reaction being completely nobody connected or engaged to it. We worked on it.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of surprised by the outside reaction, because I kind of thought it was like, as I said, it's a bit academic, right?
Yeah.
And it could also be a function of
we're playing it close to the vest.
I could be misremembering it, or it could also just be a function of nobody making the game had the experience of playing it through and getting to that moment.
That's what I mean. Like, it was revealed to them in advance of really playing it, so it wasn't that surprise.
Yeah, they had seen it in all its really half-assed, development stages
and
on the way.
out of order.
Yeah, out of order and all that.
And it's not really something you can play test over an afternoon, because it takes a little while to get to that point.
You need to lack the knowledge about what the game is to be able to sort of have that experience all the way through. I know you guys have talked about the idea of Atlas, the voice actor changing, and it was, I guess, very important that you nailed that actor, right? And you trusted that actor until there was sort of the Fontaine reveal and sort of understanding that.
Yeah, trust was everything there, right? And so there was something about either the actor or the writing or the accent that just people immediately said, this guy's no good.
Right.
When the first Atlas we had, because you have to trust this guy, and if you don't, there's no trust. There's no punch in the gut. I think we've really focused on making him have personal stakes in the story as well. That he had his family trapped. Of course, it was all fiction, right? But his he had skin in the game. He sort of spoke to you as a friend, and especially because the whole world was so hostile to you. I think it took a while to get that exactly right.
Listen, I've got a family. I need to get them out of here. But the splicers have cut me off from them. If you can reach them in Neptune's bounty, then maybe, just maybe. I know you must feel like the unluckiest man in the world right now. But you're the only hope I'll ever see my wife and child again.
Sean, what do you hope is the kind of lasting legacy of BioShock? 10 years hence, a lot of things you guys were doing, have sort of become common now, right? With, upgrades and moral choices in games and whatnot. But it was really pioneering work a decade ago. When you reflect on it, what do you hope people remember the game for sort of pushing forward?
For me, it's telling a story with the medium and how we used everything available to us to tell that story. We used the environment to set up the backstory of Rapture and really create a sense of space, which I think is vitally important to getting the players to trust that you know, to sit down and kind of like just be in the space and let these things happen. You know, even the radio logs, the rudimentary animation that we had at the time. I mean, we really sat down with the tools that we had and at our disposal and tried to tell a meaningful story. Maybe not meaningful, but something that would be memorable to people that they could take away and, like you said earlier, have that water cooler moment where they're excited enough to talk about it after they put the controller down. So for me, I think the legacy is that it was a story well told.
For me, it was a sense of place, being like the Rapture's a real thing, even though it's not. You know, it's actually a very crude, you know, from the time, you know, a relatively crude bunch of polygons and texture maps. You know, it's only, the original game was only in 720, I think. And I played a lot of it when we were testing it on a 14-inch, like, you know, SD television. That it still felt like a sense of place in the music and the characters, that it's a real place. And I think that my memories of the BioShock games is that I take away that Rapture's a real place and Elizabeth's a real person. Those are the two sort of big things that stick with me with those two games. And that's sort of what I'll always, you know, carry forward with me in my life.
BioShock is, you know, it's a place, but as we saw with Infinite, I mean, it's an idea and it's a sort of a type of game. I think a lot of people say like, oh, this is a, you know, a type of experience. When you think about, you know, your career, where you guys want to go, I mean, that idea of those types of games, do you miss it now that you've sort of moved on to other things now, or do you feel like it's sort of, you've closed that chapter?
I mean, it's always a part of what you do. Like, System Shock 2 was a part of BioShock. But it wasn't System Shock 2. It was you know, you're growing past that and trying out new things. I think BioShock and BioShock Infinite, and even going back to SWAT 4, those will always be a part of my experience as a game developer and what we're trying to do with the medium. So I don't think it's something that you just draw a line and say, you know, we'll never return, because there's always lessons that you can learn and things that you bring with you to the next project that you're working on.
Yeah. I don't think the new game is gonna, like, people are not gonna be surprised that this game is new games from us. They're gonna see a lot of what we had done before in terms of world building and aspects of storytelling. The goal is to sort of, you know, move away from the you really have no choice kind of thing, and that's a very, 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 very hard problem, which we spent years working on. But we're building upon a foundation of stuff we've done before, just trying to go in a different direction with it. But it's always going to be part of our DNA.
City where the artist would not fear the censor, where the scientist would not be bound by petty morality, where the great would not be constrained by the small. And with the sweat of your brow, Rapture can become your city as well.
hermana y yo te pusimos en ese submarino, no tendrías más de 2 años. Sí, eras mi as en la manga. Pero también eras lo más parecido que he tenido a un hijo. Por eso me duele esto. Traición, chico. La vida no es estrictamente negocios.
Y te entierro con todos los nuevecitos. ¿Crees que estoy solo en el mundo? Tengo idiotas de sobra para cubrirme las espaldas mientras recargo. Voy a acabar contigo. ¿Estoy solo en el mundo? Tengo idiotas de sobra para cubrirme las espaldas mientras recargo. Yo hice que te crearan. Yo te envié arriba. Yo te hice venir. Te mostré qué eras, de lo que eras capaz. Incluso esa vida que creíste tener fue algo que se me ocurrió y que grabé en tu cabeza. Si a eso no lo llamas familia, no sé qué más quieres. Y ahora...
Te ofrecieron la ciudad. Y la rechazaste. ¿Y qué hiciste en vez de eso? Lo que siempre has hecho. Las salvaste. Les diste precisamente lo que les había sido arrebatado. Una oportunidad. Una oportunidad de aprender. De encontrar el amor. De vivir. Y al final, ¿cuál fue tu recompensa? Nunca lo dijiste, pero creo que lo sé. Fueron ellas. Ellas. Y ellas también lo saben.